Now, a question I see get asked quite a bit lately by those who are obviously enjoying the Ahsoka series right now is, why do so many people seem to be hating on the show so much? Why do I see so many people nitpicking pretty much everything about it, right down to how good or clean the costumes look? Is it really that bad, or are some out there just being overly critical for the sake of it? And if you've been keeping up with my reviews, you'll know that I've been enjoying it for the most part. It's not amazing or perfect, but there's plenty to enjoy about it, I think. Which isn't to say those who are indeed criticizing it or nitpicking it, and I think there's a fine line between those two. But that's not to say they don't have any real points or are hating on it for no reason whatsoever. There are certainly things that even I, someone who's been enjoying it, have been left scratching their head at. Like the space battle, for example. When Ahsoka went outside the ship to confront them with lightsabers, it did feel rather convenient that none of the bad guys decided to just slow down, or essentially come to a stop and just blast the hell out of the disabled ship, ignoring Ahsoka entirely. Along with that, there have also been things that could be explained a whole lot better, the map being one such thing that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense when you really think about it. A lot of people are questioning why an ancient map would point the way to Thrawn, why it would point the way to a guy who went missing 10 years ago. Which is a valid question, but I think the map just points to the other galaxy where, for whatever reason, and probably because of the Purrgil, but that's just where it's assumed Thrawn and Ezra ended up or got taken to, again because of the Purrgil. The bigger question or questions I have about the map are, why did Morgan just leave it at the ancient ruins? I mean, she knew where the map was, Ahsoka got the information from her, and she seemed to need it. The whole point of the first two episodes was the bad guys trying to get the map back. So why again do you just leave it there of all places? Why not keep it, or at least a copy of it, with the giant intergalactic space ring you're creating in secret? That seemed like a really good hiding spot till you sort of got flushed out because someone had taken the map and then sort of used it to track their way back to you. Furthermore, what was the deal with the HK droids, the ones that were either stationed at the ruins or sent there to stop Ahsoka from getting the map? Why did they basically nuke the ruins? What if they'd succeeded and destroyed Ahsoka and the map?
There's not much left back there. Either the Jedi has the map, or it was vaporized.
She has it.
What if she does? You're lucky.
And so yeah, I certainly think there are things open to criticism, or at least questioning, when it comes to the Ahsoka series thus far. And if you're someone who's been enjoying it, you may just ignore them, or make up your own answers or excuses. That's what we tend to do when we like something or want to like something. We look for ways to defend it. As, in reverse, we look for ways to attack and or destroy the things we don't like or don't want to like. Because sure, some out there on YouTube or wherever, they're pretty much going to automatically rip Ahsoka apart because that's what their audience expects and wants them to do. As there are those out there who will love and praise everything about it because that's what their audience wants and expects them to do. That's just how things work these days. People don't always give their honest, genuine, or fair opinions as much as they give yours to get you to watch. But anyway, when it comes to some of these criticisms, like that aforementioned map, I do think, especially in that case, they came about because of Dave Filoni doing things the George Lucas way and just jumping right in the middle of the story and the action. It is just one of those Star Wars things or trademarks started right with the very first movie. Which I'm not bringing up to in any way excuse some of these issues with the map. I still think your story needs to make sense and should eventually be clear on the rather important details of the story. Even if you happen to start in the middle of things, you still have to eventually be able to make sense of them. As I like to say, consistency is king, because you don't actually have a story without it. You just have random events that hopefully, at the very least, looked cool if you sacrificed continuity for them. But here's the thing with consistency in Star Wars, something I think we sometimes forget, and I include myself in that being Star Wars or that galaxy or these stories, they don't always exactly play by the same rules our reality does. A whole different precedence was started with it from the very start, and that's arguably the more important thing to keep consistent, what it started out as, not what it should be today. This is especially true when it comes to pretty much anything that happens in space in Star Wars, or during space battles. Again, from the very start, they've intentionally been made more stylistic than realistic, meant to be evocative of aerial combat during World War II, and not so much real space combat, or what it might actually look like. And though, no, in World War II, no one was going out on the wing of a plane and trying to fend off enemy fire with a sword or something, and bless their heart if they tried, these type of things, like Ahsoka does in this very episode or the third episode, they've been seen before in Clone Wars and Rebels, which also had or developed its own, you could say, style or offshoot style of Star Wars. The latter of which, Rebels, is the show the Ahsoka series is pretty much a direct sequel or continuation of. And so you can argue it is consistent with that, even though, yeah, we could still ask of our villains or wonder why they just don't, bring their fighters to a halt and fire at the ship and blow it up and Ahsoka along with it. Why they don't do that from afar instead of making strafing runs and giving them time to make repairs and escape, and also getting one of their ships hacked into pieces. I'm not saying you can't find that cheesy or silly, but there is at least some precedence to do it in Star Wars. Nor am I saying we should always just let goofy stuff slide, especially when it comes at the expense of our villains. That scene in Kenobi where Leia is being snuck out under a trench coat makes an entire secret base full of the Empire's finest all look like fools. And I do think the ship scene in Ahsoka, her going out there and doing that, yeah, does a bit of a disservice to our new villains. I am not a huge fan of it. Especially when it happens here towards the start when we're trying to build them up as this new big threat. It'd be one thing if it were later on and we'd seen this deep hatred form between one of them and Ahsoka, and because of this hatred they really just wanted to personally kill Ahsoka, to literally blast her to pieces, and hence they'd be sort of distracted by her tactic and fall into the trap, and Ahsoka had done it knowing that it might work instead of just hoping it would work. Because in all reality, she had no reason to believe that it would work, which also does a bit of a disservice to her character, you could argue, because she does something rather foolish. So basically here, this was a case of adhering to style versus going with logic or common sense, I think we can say. And sometimes you do have to ask which is better or more interesting for the given story, and I think everyone is going to have their own opinion on which they'd like to see more. In this case, the case of Ahsoka, which, as I said, is trying to be more traditional Star Wars, I think, and is heavily influenced by the animated stuff, I don't think it's quite as bad as some are making it out to be. Again, I don't think it's great, I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. However, if you tried to do the same sort of thing in Andor, which is, of course, trying to be more grounded and real and less stylistic, I think, its aim is not to be more classic or traditional Star Wars per se, well, there it'd be absolutely terrible and look ridiculous. There are also other things that are more stylistic and look cool and seem to fit and be consistent with Star Wars, but actually aren't when you really think about it. The Holdo maneuver is an example of this. It makes one ask why a tactic like this has never been used before. And many will make up all kinds of excuses, like it would be super expensive to use this tactic all the time. And yeah, it would be, and so is building Death Stars in a galaxy where Holdo maneuvers are possible. Also, they tend to forget that you don't have to build full-on ships to pull it off. You could just strap a hyperdrive to just about anything and aim it at enemy ships and get the same effect. Strap one onto an asteroid and you could take out a Death Star for nice and cheap. But I digress, and to wrap this up, I don't think all the complaints against Ahsoka are completely unfounded or unwarranted. There are certainly some questionable decisions made or other things which could use a better explanation or an explanation at all. But at the same time, yeah, I do think that some are being maybe a bit too critical, either to serve their narrative or because they just aren't keeping in mind some of these things aren't exactly new to Star Wars. That this is a franchise that, yep, oftentimes or in certain instances does tend to favor style over logic. But that's not an excuse to not be consistent with the precedents it's long since set, or to just do whatever you want, or to completely favor spectacle over substance. Though it also doesn't mean that when it's overtly creating something different from the norm, that it can't bend the rules a little bit, like how the animated shows do lean more into style and do things that wouldn't exactly work in live action, or something like Andor leaning more into a logic in order to, in that example, show us the true brutality of the Empire. Star Wars can be many different things, but at its core it needs to be consistent across the board, even if it stretches the limits in some places. Well, that's going to be all I got for this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and either tell me what you think of Ahsoka, or what's been bugging you about the series perhaps, or what's been bugging you that others have been complaining about perhaps. Whatever you choose to do, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.